divide us. It's our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. This is a famous quote given to us by Audre Lorde to express how she feels about mental illnesses. Let's first talk about isolation. To isolate means to have minimal contact or little in common with others. In school as a child, I had a classmate that would isolate himself from everyone else during our playtime. It wasn't until now that I realized that he could have been suffering from a mental disease. 1 out of every 10 kids suffer from mental illnesses, such as ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, anxiety disorder, or even depression. What if I told you that the child you have at home could be suffering from a mental illness that you know nothing about? Too often, we find that through lack of knowledge, mental awareness has failed many times before. He or she knows one. Acknowledge the history, identify the symptoms, and knowing how to cope and respond could bring forth reform in our society. It is important not to leave out the history of mental illnesses, such as the 1840s reform. The 1840s reform is where activists lobbied for better living conditions for their loved ones. How would you feel if your loved ones had a mental illness and lived in an unhealthy or unsanitary treatment center? Deinstitutionalization movement. It has been present since 1955 to give the proper treatment to citizens with a mental issue. In the 1800s, they never had the technology we have today. So imagine going around back then and being treated for an illness that you never had. Now let's identify mental illness symptoms. Most mental illness victims experience a significant change in thinking, emotion, or their behavior. They also feel distress or have problems with social functioning in society. It is just as important to ask the qualifying questions to seek out their symptoms. If you don't figure out that they have a symptoms, it's important that you find the closest psychiatrist. Mental Illness Month is something not a lot of people pay attention to because they don't know nothing about it. They don't believe someone else or someone else around them may have an illness. They celebrate this day mostly on October 10th. We all should know who to call in case we or someone we are around has a mental illness. Ask yourself, do I know exactly who to talk to if I experience a mental illness? Another way is to embrace differences, prevent bullying, and never ignore the signs. Being that the negative effects, including injustice and unlivable conditions, worsen the mental illness community, it is important that we are informed on what is going on around us because it may be closer than we think. Acknowledging the history, identifying symptoms, and knowing how to cope and respond will create a better tomorrow. If you don't pay attention to the signs, it could be detrimental in the long run.